Well, we are here today with my dear friend Racheal Yard, who is Miss Patience herself, because we have had all
Oh
kinds of struggles
gosh,
trying to get this this interview done. Is it important or what? Yes,
it is.
yes, it
Yes.
is. So, Racheal, thank you so much
Very
for
welcome.
understanding. Thank you for your time. Racheal is first and foremost a follower after Jesus, and she is making a difference all the time through her ministry called Throne of Grace. She is just an awesome wife of many years to Danny and mom to three incredible kids. And I just have enjoyed walking alongside you and seeing what you're doing through the years, because we've known each other for quite a while. I mean, it's 20,
What more than 10? Yeah, at least
yeah, I hate to
15,
say
maybe
how many,
longer.
but
Yeah.
however old Charlotte is, when I first saw you, she was a newborn in your arms.
Okay, that's almost 19, 18 years.
Yeah, yeah. But not that
All
we're
right.
getting older or anything. Our
No,
kids are, but
we
we're
look the
maintaining.
same.
We're at our prime. We're at our prime.
Right. Yeah. We just get
So,
better.
just real quick, I want you to talk about
Yes.
yourself. Go back to the beginning, your family, where you grew up, all that.
Okay. I was born in Fairbanks, Alaska, because my dad was in the Army, and we lived there about 9 months. And then we moved back to their hometown of Illinois. And from there, they live in a little town, Kankakee, Illinois. And then we ended up in Ohio for several years till I was about 4 years old. And then moved to California. So since 4, I've lived in Southern California in my life. So I kind of feel like I've lived here most of my life. Well, all of my life, but minus just a little bit. Raised in a Christian family with mom and dad present and involved, and busy life and everything, but had that influence there. It was important to be at church. It was important to understand a relationship with Christ, and was given good tools for that moving forward. And that's been a blessing to be able to grow up like that. But that was my beginnings.
Awesome. With a supportive family, with mom and dad in the house, what was your childhood like? Was it stable? Was it family centric? Do you feel like you had a pretty good childhood?
Yes. I feel like it was very stable, very family focused. My mother and I have still a very good relationship, close. She was my best friend for a long, somebody I could speak to all the time and felt safe with is my father too. He worked a lot because that's what needed to happen, but he was there and present, very loving and engaged as well. So I feel like I had a great example of parents and marriage growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, they came from a small town in the Midwest, so it's different in growing up in California is different. I'm going to see a lot of it, especially California. It's kind of a small pocket of special, but but anyways, yes, ultimately that was a great example. And we had a very close family. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and all of us, with the normal sibling business, but we all got along and enjoyed being a family for the
And
most
you were a
part.
church-going family as well.
Yes.
With like some
Yes.
form of faith all the time.
Yes. Church was important. Youth group, the whole thing. Camp, all that fun stuff.
Would you say that you were a fairly confident, outgoing, well-adjusted kid?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, confident in just who I was. I was more of a quiet person, and if I didn't know people, I wouldn't really say much. That's just personality.
Mm-hmm.
It's changed and grown. Obviously, I could care less now, but when I was younger, that was a problem. I mean, I would make friends, of course, but it would be I could count them on one hand, and they were very good friends, and we kind of relied on each other because fake has never been a good thing for me. I don't enjoy lots of people because they just know my name. I would rather have good friends that I keep close. So yeah, not that I lacked confidence, but I wasn't fearful of.
Well, I have yet to find anybody like in junior high age who's absolutely confident. I don't care how well you've been raised. I mean, things are growing at an alarming rate, and your feet are too big, and your nose is too big, and your eyebrows, what do I do with these? And my teeth are doing stuff. I have no idea how to primp or do my hair, and I'm just, it's the ugly duckling thing.
Just trying to match. That's all. Just trying to match.
Scrunchy socks, same color.
Granted, yeah. Back then it was, great, all colors, all kinds of crazy. But yeah, Uh-huh.
Well, just to dive into our topic, when did you
Yes.
first hear about sex? From whom and what circumstances?
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact. I think it just kind of over time, several conversations. Obviously, it was an open door to talk to my parents, mostly my mom. And if I had questions, I would ask, and she would answer. Um, and at that time, 50 years ago, less than that, maybe 45 years, whatever, however old I was when they did classes at school. But we would learn about the basics of human biology and what happened, to make you the difference between the male and female and how a baby was made and all of that. But that was kind of it. They didn't get into the how-tos of things. So not really a sex discussion. But then based off of that, of course, kids speak, and there's always access to stuff more now than there was then. But so probably the first time I thought about that or talked about that was with friends, I would think, peers. But any of the questions that I had, I could ask. And I felt like that was answered as needed. And my mom didn't shy away from the topic. But I think also in the sense that in her perspective, that topic wasn't really as open as what I was being presented with, maybe with people in school and whatnot. So her answers were what she had, her knowledge base, her ability to share on the topic. And she did a great job. I don't blame her at all for anything that I chose later. that was
Well,
me.
something that I find interesting is that even many of the people I've talked to on, for my book, Great Love for Life, many of them, I think, tend to point to this happened, I was molested. This happened, we didn't have a father in the family, or my father was very angry or a drunk, or we moved so much and it was really hard to make, there's something that kind of pushed them toward the choices. And I see your case is interesting because we don't always have to have this was negative, this was negative, this was negative, therefore I fell into it or I was forced into it. Because, strong-willed kids are great leaders, but they're also tough to raise. I've had a couple of those myself. And it sounds like you were one of those, that you were just strong-willed, intelligent, knew your own mind. I mean, maybe you can talk about that a little
What
bit.
I thought at the time. Right. Yeah, there weren't any great things that happened to send me down a path in one way or I didn't have any devastating experiences or lack of parental involvement or lack of the father or any of those things. I feel like sometimes, well, it could be either way. You can have an event that happens that leads you to make choices that are not good for you, or you can have a great family and yet you can still make choices that don't line up with what should have been there, right? And I don't know why one or the other happens. Obviously, it has something to do with personality and kind of maybe headstrongness. But for me, it was knowing full well the difference between things. And I think I was kind of used to Christianese or living a life like that. That was just here. That was kind of autopilot. But when faced with something, I didn't really connect. That's who I am. It's just what I know, but that's not really who I didn't connect it with who I am with my actions. So, or I felt like it this will be okay because I don't know. I just didn't really give it a hard line. I did what I wanted to do, or what I thought I would want to do, or not necessarily what someone else would want me to do. I really just made my own choices about it, and liked the way it felt, like the sin that was a part of. So I chose that for that to be okay for me.
Well, I like this point of view because I think often as parents, we can flog ourselves to death if something goes wrong, if someone makes a choice. But we need to remember, I always kind of go back to Lucifer was created by God. He knew God's love. Greatest father in the world still chose to rebel. And I mean, our kids so many times, they just have to go through that season of making their own choices. And then, honestly, I do believe that when they're older, they're going to, follow what's right and go with how they've been raised. But so did you feel like your church experience did much to prepare you for all of this?
I think the church experience was very rich. We went to a Lutheran church, but even saying that, the entirety of my youth, but for a bunch of it. But it was very Christ-centered,
Mm-hmm.
biblical teaching. You know, there wasn't a hang up on things that didn't have meaning. It had meaning, it had presence. And so the youth group was very current, and you know, we did activities, and the messages were great, and engagement was great, and there was still instruction on, obviously, you know, things that lined up with godly principles. It was there, it was present. I don't really know where the disconnect happened for me, but maybe it was, you know, head knowledge versus heart knowledge. I mean, I felt like I'd made a decision to give my life to Christ when I was in high school. But I had never been tested in any of those things. It might have been areas in my life where Satan knew I might have weakness. You know, I hadn't been to those places yet. So
Right.
when I was confronted with them, without having that solid bedrock of conviction, it wasn't hard for me to be, well, that's separate from what you know, like, I can do that. It's not going to be a big deal. And
Right.
justify my actions.
Well, how
So
old were you then when you started dating and having boyfriends? And
the first real boyfriend was probably around first year of high school, and I didn't have sex with anybody till I was out of, like, that was in first year of college and situation like that. I mean, I really thought I was holding the line because that was not happening. But what really needs to happen to cause you to share that intimacy of yourself with someone else? It's not only intercourse. There's a lot of other things that connect you to another person.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I'm still good at that. I'm still a good girl. I mean, you know, whatever. So that sort of compromise began probably about my first year of high school. And then it just was kind of a slippery slope where the next step was really easy to take when it came.
Did you know, what were your basic hopes and dreams regarding love and marriage and all of that when you were a young girl?
Um, Hopes and dreams for a marriage that would be something I would do, would last forever, you know, would last for my whole lifetime, that I could have that sort of a commitment with somebody that I loved and loved me. And as a young girl, I didn't really know what all that entailed. You know, what does that mean? Commitment. Wasn't even thinking about the hard times that you have to go, none of that. But ideally, of course, I wanted to be married. I wanted to have children and live happily ever after. You know, that was my dream. And of course, I knew the way to do that was to not jump the gun. You don't want to give something away. In my mind, in a kind of a twisted fashion, I knew that the person I wanted to marry should be the person that I first experienced sex and intimacy with, because that's the design that God has. I knew that enough. And so when I got close to the boundary line of experiencing that outside of marriage, I tried to make it okay by doing it with the person I thought I wanted to be with, rather than the person I was just joking around with, you know. And so it made this sort of weird logical process so that I'm still okay with the person that I really want to be. You know, it's just this strange
You
justification
gave yourself to him first, therefore, how
because I
special is
wanted to
that?
be
He's
right.
still
So
your
it was
number
still
one.
close. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
still sort of the right way, you know, kind of
Well,
thing.
how did that relationship from high school
It
end up?
didn't last. It was on again, off again for years, actually. First year of college, and then I was in a situation with another young man, which led to my getting pregnant and having an abortion. And then after that, re-engaging with this other guy, coming clean, being honest about who I was and what was going on. And it seemed like a good relationship. At one point, he had given his life to Christ, and I thought, okay, God, you know, make this work. And it just was off and on, just ultimately did not work. And I look back now and I'm so thankful. You know, you pray for making this, you know, and I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change not being with him. I'm actually very glad that didn't work. Just, this is too much there.
Maybe you can kind of
Wanting.
talk about that, how that presented itself, what drew you to that person that you were just, quote, having fun with?
Right. I think it was being somebody giving me attention in a way that I hadn't really experienced before, for one. He was a very popular with the girls, very high profile basketball player, and he was interested in little me, you know, and I was different from the other girls and the other things and the lifestyle and all of that. And yet it was one of those things that he recognized the difference and felt, kind of held me in a different place, but yet the behaviors were the same. I mean, what was his expectation was the same. It wasn't like he made me do anything. Obviously, I was there for the ride. But I think the notoriety of that was pretty neat. And also just, it made me feel different. Like, wow, that's kind of cool. It made me feel special. Maybe that he wanted my attention and wanted a relationship with me. And so, and genuinely so, like not one of a number, which is kind of how it had been. So that's what drew me in. And even people around me are like, why are you bothering with this person? Well, and I'm like, no. So
it feels good. I feel important.
Exactly.
I'm liking the attention.
Leave me alone. Yeah. And I didn't, and after it all said and done and didn't work out, I heard later from his brother that he was devastated by my not having anything to do with him anymore, and how much that had all damaged and hurt me. And
we'll go into the circumstances. What devastated you, and
so
what you feel so guilty?
A little bit into relationship with him, and I think it might have been the second time we ever had sex. I was told that I should go wash up because the condom broke, and I was very inexperienced. And why were you more careful? I mean, for a long time I realized I was angry about that. Like, you knew better than I wouldn't be able to know that, and yet you didn't bother to stop. Like, you just needed to hello. So so I knew instantly. I'm like, well, okay, no, I just knew that I was gonna have to deal with being pregnant. That's just, wow. And sure enough, I was. And it was kind of his MO, if that was the case, that I'll just take it to get an abortion. And I was actually desiring that, because I knew already, remind you, I knew going in what was okay to do and not to be doing and all of this. So as I processed what was going on, I can't tell my parents, no way, they've never trusted me again. My whole future's just started in front of me. I can't be a mom right now. I couldn't tell, all of these things. I would disappoint them, whatever. And so I actually was in the state of mind to hate what was going on in my body, which is so wrong. But it's the only way I know. There's the only way that I could have possibly gone through with that process. It was kind of like me watching me do this thing. It wasn't really, and that was because I knew it was wrong. I knew that this was a life. I knew I'd be killing my child, but I couldn't touch base with any of those things. It just wouldn't. Right. So anyway, after the fact, it was like, well, I can't. I walked away from the relationship from him. It was too much. There was a moment of complete remorse and regret and brokenness. And then, we have good defense mechanisms, so that got all covered over, and I said, I'm moving on, and never saw him again. And saw his brother, I don't know, a couple of years later, and he was like, what did you do to my brother? I said, I didn't do anything to your brother. What are you talking about? It's like, he is so broken. He is still devastated. I don't know what, so the difference in somebody being a run-of-the-mill is kind of how you handle pregnancies versus this person he thought was a little bit different coming in. I feel like I was a different kind of girl than he was used to being around. Even though I didn't really act any different. It woke him up a little to the nature of what was going on, because it hurt.
If you had to guess, how many times do you think he had probably had that situation come up?
I know for a fact with one particular girl, at least 5 times or more. And that's just one. It may be even more than I'm trying to remember. Yeah. And she was a mess. Like, she'd still call while we were in our, and he'd be like, but why? Because she's devastated. She's devastated. And I know that now. But yeah. So hopefully it opened his eyes to what really goes on.
Your choices have repercussions.
And how much this is hurting the person that you are just not really thinking about in that fashion.
Right. How can you say you love someone when you're really not protecting them?
Yeah.
Protecting their future, protecting their
right.
self-worth, all of that.
Right.
So you dated him for how long?
Just a year that I was at that school. First year of college. And then I moved back home, finished up, and then transferred to another school and finished my education. But it led me, I didn't come to grips with what I had done. I hadn't really opened that box. I put it away. I dealt with, I kind of dealt with my demons, as people like to say, and didn't even really acknowledge, didn't really ask for forgiveness. It hadn't hit home quite like that. And within the next 5 years, though, God did a lot of work on me, and well, first of all, my choices went down the other track, like very promiscuous, very sexual prowess. I'm gonna, this is a strength I have. This is something I can do. And I surrounded myself with people that enforced that in me and encouraged, oh, what you did was fine. It's totally, you're right as a woman, all of those things. And I lived that way when I went to this college. As I went to finish my schooling, I was very involved in the pro-choice movement, very active, writing poetry for their displays, going to the club meetings. It's my body, talk things, it was me. And I've asked God to forgive me for what I have spoken during that time, but I just wonder, and it breaks my heart to think about who listened to me, who heard that and said, okay, I'm going to do it because you told me that was okay. And it's because it's not. So within a period of about 5 years from having had the abortion, God got a hold of me and changed that. So,
wow.
But that was all during the course.
So you first felt remorse about the whole thing you probably felt remorse at the time, but then really.
Yeah, initially right after I did, you deal with that. Most women will say that that's very common. There was sort of this moment of realization, and then it quickly gets to survive and move forward.
Do you feel like you tried to replace that with anger?
Maybe not anger. I tried to replace that with what I was hearing around me, but it was your right. It's your body. It's your choice. You weren't ready to be a mother. All of those words that at the time seemed very true. They are true. They might be true. However, that's not the bottom line. And that's not what this is about. It's not about that it's my choice or that it's my body. That wasn't my body. And it isn't about my rights. It's about life. And whose life are we talking about? And the child does not need to pay the death penalty for a decision that I made for me. That's not right. That's not right. And that is the bottom line. So I didn't want to face that. So I, again, continued to surround myself with people and things and activities that reinforced the decisions I'd already made. So remorse came. It was interesting because I rededicated my life a few years down the road, and really started growing in my faith, my understanding, and my relationship with Christ. And a friend of mine said, will you go with me to this abortion recovery place? Because I had asked for forgiveness. I had met God on that hill, and I had given it to him, and he had taken it. He had completely done it. I didn't, there's nothing more I could have done. He did it, and I accepted it. We were good. What I didn't understand that there were things that I still hung on to. That's the difference. And so he did it, but I didn't let him have all of it. So she said, will you go with me? And I said, sure, I'll go with you because I'm fine. I don't need it. And so I went with her. Right. She wanted to go alone. And we went to one of these like 8 to 10 week groups, and you work through the process of everything, much like what I do now with women. And I was blown away by what I had dealt with, me personally, which had blocked me from being useful in God's hands. Like I wasn't going to go tell people I had this experience. Although I had given it to him, it was still, kind of private. And so it's not useful if I can't be useful in that way for him. It's a secret. Well, secrets don't help. So anyway, he worked on that and worked through me, and a lot more healing happened because I let him have it. And he changed it all together. So yeah, I guess remorse came when I kind of rededicated my life, started thinking about that and really looking at what had been my decisions, how I'd been living, started to change those things, draw some hard lines, and look at what happened. And then when I finally was honest about it, a lot of stuff changed. So.
Well, did you find that any of your friends that you were around, even at the time, did you find that any of them expressed remorse? You said you were surrounding yourself with people who... Yes.
It's almost like, when you have to take medicine, it's going to be terrible, but I got to do it. I mean, that still was a part of the people around me. So one very good friend of mine, and you would think it would have tipped me off, but I already knew. There's no secret. I'm not going to pretend that as I walked into the pregnancy center to get a pregnancy test, I didn't know that I was already planning on an abortion, whether or not they gave it to me, right? So this was a pregnancy counseling center. I went with two of my friends, one who had had a couple abortions and she knew the location for the pregnancy test. The other one, and for where to get the abortion done. The other one had just gone through her second abortion. And as we walked in and we sat in this little room with this lady who, and they weren't trying to promote it because they thought it was right. No, they were hurting. I mean, it wasn't a good thing, but here, this is what you have to do. That's really what it was. A lot of times people who are on the other side of understanding it and have been healed from the process don't use the words it was a choice. They understand that it's a lot of times an unchoice. Now, that wasn't my circumstance. I totally chose that for myself. But many women, they don't feel there's an alternative.
Right.
And so they don't have an option other than this choice. And it's sad. That's very, very, very common. So we're sitting there, and this little lady at the pregnancy center where they don't do abortions, they'll do, it was a pregnancy counseling center. And she looked at me and said, well, we'll give you the test. We want you to sit in this room. And we watched a little movie about what happens when you have an abortion. It wasn't graphic, but it was literally, here's the doctor, these are the tools, this is what's going to happen. And I remember snippets. I was just so like wearing a mask. I just was like, I'm not present. As I'm sitting there, my friend who had just had an abortion is losing her mind. She's crying. She's, sobbing. And I'm like, you're okay. You're okay. Like, I disconnected because I couldn't have handled it. And inside me, I knew that. It's, we have such a propensity. God made us with ways for us to survive, right? And whatever defense mechanisms, whatever you want to call them. But in me knew if I really faced what was happening, I would lose it. I wouldn't be able to do this, and I had to do this, right? So I separated from that. And yeah, she was a mess. She since found healing. Both of them have, and they're amazing Christian women, and their stories are just as powerful in their lives. But at the time, they were well-meaning. They wanted to help me do what I was saying I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And they
said,
okay, I know how to do it. Right. So yes, I was surrounded by people at that time when it happened. It wasn't like the voices of choice and all. It was mostly my voice and people that were trying to be loving and kind and helpful. And then after the fact, when I couldn't face, that was what I did. And just the grotesque nature and the violence and the decision that I made, I couldn't face that. That's when I chose to continue to surround myself with people tickling my ears with those things and reinforcing that in my life and me growing in strength in that perspective, because that's what I was a part of. So without thinking for myself, I knew better that if I did, that would change, right? I wasn't ready to acknowledge it. So find whatever you want.
I think you're stepping into something here that is super important. That so often, I think in our society, people feel, I've done this. This is my label now because I've done this, or I've been involved in this lifestyle, and I can't change what's happened to me or what I've done. So I've just got to find ways to cope. And if you tell me anything else, you're trying to say I'm bad.
Right. Or I'm useless anyway.
Yes.
Like, what's the point? Why do I bother? Because you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. That kind of phrase, which couldn't be further from the truth.
No, God really does have healing for broken hearts.
And that is the other part of my journey, when I realized that I didn't have to live in that place, sort of juggling my justifications and dealing, carrying this understanding or the lack of it, having to live in a place where I couldn't really look at reality. That was not being really alive. That was not being free. That was not being awake. That's just the opposite of the design that God made for me, whatever that might be. This is not it. And so to understand that when you're broken, it doesn't surprise God. When you make a poor decision, that he's not surprised. Like, oh, shoot, I didn't know she was going to do it. He's aware of that. The difference is when I bring that to him and I acknowledge it, he says, give me that, I'm going to fix it. And he transforms it into something completely different. That's where you get the phrase beauty for ashes. That's exactly what that is. And only he can do that. Only God could take something so horrible, so anathema to the very purpose of being a woman. I have the honor and the ability to grow life in me
Mhm.
But to go against that very thing and destroy life can kill you. It can take you apart,
Mhm.
whether or not you realize it. That's the deep-seatedness of this. So when whatever it is you bring it. He doesn't say, come to me perfect. He says, come to me when bring it to me. Bring your
As
brokenness, bring
you
your trash,
are.
bring your drunk.
Mhm.
Let me have it, and I will transform that. And he
Mhm.
truly does it. And sometimes women come before they're destitute in that place. They get it sooner. The sooner the better. I love it when a 16-year-old will give me a call or reach out or come. I'm like, thank you. You're not going to waste 30 years of your life.
Mhm.
You're doing this now.
Mhm.
Wow, what a difference. But sometimes it takes longer for women, and then they come. But it doesn't matter. You came at 50, you came at 70, you walk through this, you let God have this. It doesn't make any difference. And one woman that stands out in my mind, and we're still in contact. She's a wonderful lady. She fought some of the things we did. We do some activities throughout the class just to draw that out, to draw out the object lesson a little bit more. And it was so, she couldn't believe it. And she said, after we did this particular activity, she said, I wanted to stand up on my chair and say, I'm not doing it. I said, oh, okay, well, you did it then. She's like, I know. And I did it. And on this side of it, on this side of letting it go, on this side of understanding and letting God have all of that, she said, if I had done this 50 years ago, I would have had to go through this counseling and that counseling and the other counseling and the other thing, because all I needed was God to give him the root of my problem.
Mhm.
Because it's just this insidious, it's like vine that
Mhm.
tangles into so many aspects of life that women don't realize. And one of the goals of this ministry, of this recovery group thing that I am part of, is to help them connect the dots and understand a little bit about, like, I'm not crazy. This is not, I'm not supposed to be living like this. I'm not supposed to. So anyways, that was a great thing, but that was her surprise. Like, wow, if I
Mhm.
just follow through. So no matter the junk that you bring,
Mhm.
we can't be afraid to give that to him if he wants to take it.
Well, this is such a touchy topic, especially now. I mean, it's
Yes.
always been a touchy topic.
Yes.
It's like, just one drop and it's wildfire.
Yes.
How have you handled the hate, the judgment that comes your way?
Uh, Thankfully, there hasn't been that much. I mean, it's whatever. I don't post things to public a lot of times. It's usually people who know me and follow me. Not all of them agree with me, but
Mhm.
a friend might do something and then some person will come on and disagree and make a point. And it's kind of two-sided. One is the person who's fighting for that perspective because they're looking at it. It's not their experience, but they think abortion, you can't tell someone not to have it. They don't understand
Mhm.
the
How dare
bottom
you
line.
take away their right?
Right. And
Mhm.
I would never choose it, but I can't tell someone else. And so in that perspective, I would explain life's value, all life,
Mhm.
any age, it doesn't matter. You were once a little thing. Like, it's,
Mhm.
and they could argue that. And there was somebody that went back, went back and forth on that. And she didn't want to, she was arguing when life's a life. I said, okay, I can't tell you what to believe. I can tell you what science shows us. I can tell you what the Bible says, which doesn't matter to you because that's not where we're coming from. But
Mhm.
you can't deny that it's destruction of a living thing, whether it looks like a person or not yet. It is. That's the definition of life. It's growth and change. And it's changing from the first second.
Mhm.
Growth happens a little down the road, but it changes from the moment of conception. It is not the same two things. It is now one thing. And you can see that. You can literally see that under a microscope. If you don't believe me, go watch it. It's there.
Mhm.
So anyways, so the one hand is trying to help somebody who chalks it up to a political or a woman's right to understand that this is not what we're talking about when we talk about
Right.
abortion. And the other hand, it's the hurting woman who's fighting to remain sane. And um, I have people I know very dear to me who are still in that fight, and it's a daily hit my knees. But if there is an opportunity for conversation, it's got to be full of compassion and understanding. And that's where I'm
Mhm.
thankful for what I have been through. Had I not experienced that, and there's women who work with this ministry who haven't been through abortion, but they have a heart for what's going on, so they can come compassionately. But it's a
Right.
different level when it's something you understand. And all of the pushback I can answer because I had that pushback, and we can have a conversation lovingly, but I'm going to be honest. but I understand where so that's a blessing. I'm thankful for that, because I wouldn't be able to do that without having gone through it. Just like, 10 years ago, I lost a baby. We went through a miscarriage. Did I love that? No, I did not love that. But am I thankful for that? Yes, because that's one more layer of hurt that accompanies a lot of women who've been through abortion. It's one of the things that can be a possible physical side effect of having had abortion, one more, whatever, that I understand that pain, and I understand, and I can speak to that. Thank you, God, for making me more useful. It's not fun. I don't know, but I'm thankful for it. And
Right.
I wouldn't change it. If that was why I had to go through it, glory be to God. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
There was a book you shared with me. Gosh, it must have been 10 years ago, maybe. And I can't even remember the name of it right now, but it was from the viewpoint of women who had been raped or victims of incest.
Victors and
So
victims is
often
what it was
that is
called.
that what was it?
Victims and victors is what it's called.
Right. And the premise being, so many times that's that last ditch effort to
Yes.
justify. Well, but if it's been put on them, how can you possibly blah, blah, blah? Can you talk about that perspective a little
I
bit?
can. So
I found that very transformational to my way of thinking.
yes, as I navigated, okay, Lord, I understand that you want me to speak against abortion. There's that gray area. There's that but what about? I mean, how can I tell? I've never been raped. I've not had experienced incest. How do I tell somebody who has been through something so violent and so violating that they should stay pregnant and, keep that reminder? We're told, that it's compassionate to not make that woman have 9 months worth of reminder of that event, and then a lifetime if they keep that baby, of the person that have violated them. That's cruel. You shouldn't do that. I feel like, how do I answer that? I know I can't really speak to that. I just know it's wrong. I just know that God would never condone destroying another human being for the benefit of someone else. That's not how God. All life is valuable. All life has uniqueness and is purposed. Mm-hmm. So this book was very helpful because it was basically a gentleman that interviewed over 200 women, some in the category of having been raped, some in the category of having experienced incest. And it's their responses to the question when you got pregnant. The women, as I remember, I haven't read in a while, I've recommended to several people, but as I remember, the majority of the women who had been through the experience of rape that kept their child, it was very difficult. Obviously, it's going to be difficult, but they don't regret it. And after the fact, the blessing of having that child far outweighed what had happened in the purpose of, or, with the experience of having been raped. Right. And a lot of those women gave their child up for adoption. They've gone through and they've healed from the experience of the rape. And now they also know that they didn't put that debt onto someone else. They allowed that child the opportunity at love and at life, because that child didn't ask to be conceived in that fashion. It's not the child's responsibility to make the payment for someone else's actions. So the women that had been raped that had gone through an abortion, however, one of them stands out. I'm gonna have to pull it out because I've been asked about this several times and I'll have it right in my fingertips. But read the book, Victims and Victors. She explains that she went through the abortion and has since gotten past the experience of having been raped and being healed from that, but cannot get past the abortion experience, because what in effect you've done is you've been through, someone has committed a violent crime on you, has perpetrated that on you, and you weren't innocent in that and you didn't ask for it, but here's what's happened. So when you then turn around and you abort your child, you've now become just as violent a perpetrator to an innocent human being as what was done to you. So that messes with your mind. Mm-hmm. And this woman struggled at this point when she was being interviewed to address that appropriately. She couldn't get past what that meant for her unborn child and what she had done and she was responsible for. So it's not really the compassionate answer, because we think it's also sold as, not we think, but it's sold as a quick, easy out, get your life back. And I can't tell you.
Never happened.
Yeah, I can't tell you what a big lie that is, because once you're pregnant, regardless of the outcome, whether you lose that baby, you give that baby up for adoption, you keep that baby, you abort that baby, right? You are different because you have now had to consider another human being. You've been pregnant. You're different. You're changed. You can't undo that.
Right.
So whatever you do with that will affect you for the rest of your life. And abortion is not the easy answer. We say, get it done, go back to, you'll never get your life back. Never. It'll never be the same as.
Two wrongs won't make things right.
No, and even if you keep the baby, you'll never get, it's going to be different. That's where you ask yourself on the front end, is this something I need to be doing, right? That's a whole nother topic, but responsibility for your actions is huge in the topic of abortion, and it is not birth control, and it should not be taken lightly.
Right.
And a lot of people do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where's your responsibility in this scenario? Mm-hmm. Even if you stop thinking of yourself for 9 months and allow somebody else the right to have a life and to be loved, even if it's not by you. Right. So yeah, did I answer the question?
Oh,
I don't know what the whole question was, but
you answered
that book, well,
icing and a cherry on top. It was perfect.
The other part of that was that people who had been victims of incest, and the idea that that's atrocious. Why would you keep that child? Why would you tell that girl she has to go through that pregnancy? And the majority, like the summary of the women who have expressed their experience with that was that, imagine you're in a scenario with somebody who's raping you on a regular basis or abusing you in some fashion like that, and you get pregnant and you get an abortion. What does that do for you? That puts you right back into that same scenario continuously. You have no out, and that's a way to cover up the indiscretion. Nobody will ever know. You're a continual victim. You have no opportunity for anyone to know about that. However, if you get pregnant and you don't go have an abortion and everybody has to know, it ends because somebody is aware of it. And then what this woman's words were like, I can actually do something right. I can love this child. You know, it was a way to make right out of something horrible for this particular woman that I remember in my mind, but also to escape that situation, because you can't hide that. And it has to end. Now everybody's circumstances are different, but
I did find that heartbreaking when they would talk about, you know, a young girl goes in and she's either been, you know, abused by a pimp or whatever, or the incestual thing, and they're forced to, and then the agency that is doing the abortion just goes along with it, and they are prolonging that agony. They are complicit in the crime, which is
illegal, like you said. They're complicit in crime, and that's a different topic as well. But there are many. Liveaction.com has a whole set of undercover video interviewing things that they have done with Planned Parenthood, phone calls, even, you know, people setting that up. Anything from Racheal, I want to put money just on Black abortions. Oh, sure, no problem, too. Hey, I'm a pimp, you know, or I want to say a pimp, but somebody came in pretending to be a sexual boss, and, you know, he has a girl who's pregnant, who's underage, but, you know, can I bring her in? And the gist of that conversation was, well, sure, bring her in. He's like, well, how long will it be before she can work? And the comment is, well, she doesn't have to work just above the waist or below the waist. So
wow,
what is this? And that's illegal. When you understand, if you know that there's trafficking happening, or an underage girl being abused by somebody overage, you are, as a human being, I would hope, but also as a citizen, obligated to protect that child. No, it's about the dollar. It's about the money. All day long, it is blood money, and that's what it's about. And they do a good job of income gathering.
Yes,
they prey on the weakness.
If you could go back and give counsel to the young Racheal, what do you wish you could tell yourself, like at 12 years and on?
Part of me says I would want to tell her, you know, understand the value of your sexuality, understand the gift of intimacy that you've been given. You have that to share, and you should care enough about the person that you want to be with. That's the bond that unites you in that special way. Don't give it away. Don't cheapen it. Don't do that. Of course, that's what you would want, and that's what I pass to my children. I try to explain that to them in more detail than I understood it. But I ultimately, at the end of the day, can't make their choices for them. And then I look at the other flip side of that coin, and I see what God has done with my poor choices, what he's done with my good choices, but what he's done with my poor choices even more. And the fact that if I hadn't gone through that, hadn't made decisions to compromise myself, or to get pregnant and have abortion, or have to go through that process of the pain and the agony and the healing, then the last 20 years of me being able to be used in that way wouldn't have happened. And I'm thankful for that. So it's kind of it's not an absolute what I would go back and tell myself. I wouldn't want to go through that, but I'm thankful for having gone through that because of what God has done with it and how he's grown me and who I am today. If you would have told me 20 years ago I'd be on a bandstand telling people about abortion and how to get recovery from that and what it really is, I would be like, you are out of your mind. But that's what I do. And I'm so happy to be doing it. When I'm doing it, it's not because of me. So it's a hard question. You know, I could say the right, the good answer and then the one.
Well, no, it's the answer that's right is what's true. And I love what you do. And I think it shows such an amazing ability of God that he truly does turn our weaknesses into our greatest strengths.
Absolutely.
If we will allow it, if we bring to him who we are, don't get under the shame, the guilt, the fear, the condemnation, all of that. Just real quick, I'd like for you to tell me maybe one of your favorite stories of redemption that you've seen in these years of working in this ministry.
Gosh, there's so many. So the one that comes to mind mostly, so when a woman goes through abortion, or initially comes to mind, there's a lot of ways that affects her life. And not everybody deals with it. It can affect relationships with future boyfriends and spouses. It can affect relationships with future children. It can affect your femininity. It can affect just a whole host of ways that you function or dysfunction moving forward. And so there was this young, early 20s girl who came, and she came in beautiful face and just scrubbed and unattractive hair and just a big old sweatshirt, sweatpants, and combat boots, just kind of hiding in her clothing and hiding in who she was. And come to find out over time, she would have been very desirable. Somebody probably would have said, "You're beautiful, I want to date you," but she did not. She had so closed herself off to all of that because she did not even want to be in the position to consider a relationship, because she didn't want to have to deal with what had happened in her life, what she had chosen. And so she just said, "I'm never going to date anybody. I'm not going to get married. I'm going to never have children." And she was very hard-hearted about those things. Right. And so through the process of the 10 weeks where we broke down some walls and we walked through everything from anger, depression, forgiveness, the whole 9 yards. Who is Christ in this picture, right? What does God mean in this? How does healing happen? What is this about? It just unfolded just like a beautiful, literally, like just watched her layers just fall away, and she would come to love herself the way God made her to be again. And it was just so beautiful because, again, over 10 weeks, you're not perfectly done. Of course, it's a lifetime of growing. It's a lifetime of learning and walking in a different pattern. But within 10 weeks, there is a notable difference. And I see it every time. I always tell these ladies, I'm going to take a Polaroid at the very beginning. Don't be scared, because I'm going to take another one later and I'm going to give them both to you, but I want you to see the difference. We don't, but that's how I always want to do that. So by the end of our group, she had told us about one of her best friends who knew her brother, and he's just such a good guy, and did not come at her in any way, shape, or form that she could tell was any interest. But he was there alongside her, supporting, praying for her, loving her as a friend. He came to our memorial. We met him. He was platonic. She was still, looking a little bit closed off, but much, much better. Well, come to find out, within a year later, we get this follow-up information about, so-and-so, we actually are dating now. And, and I see her, and she's this beautiful, she's taking care about herself. She's enjoying the way that God made her, the way she looks. She's caring about presenting an appearance that's peaceful, and she's not hard anymore. She's open, she's soft, she's loving life, she's enjoying freedom. She's looking like a woman. She's behaving like a woman. So then they get married. They now have 3 children. And she was so excited. She invited us to her wedding. So we went. And I remember her sitting there saying she couldn't wait till after, when we all went out and talked to him. And she lifted up her wedding dress and showed me her shoes, because she had these beautiful little heels on, which I'd never seen her in anything but boots and sweatpants and all that. She's like, look, I wear, she was so excited to just love being a woman and not be afraid to experience all the things that come with that. And that's just, it's sweet to see God rewire, which is an analogy that I like to use with, but it's kind of like the wires in the wall, the blue and the orange, they're all like this. And we're made to be emotional. We're made to be empathetic. We're made to enjoy. That's part of being a woman. All the different levels, of course, but that's part of, we're different from men in that way. And when that's all twisted and we can't really express and experience life like we're meant to for ourselves and for others. So he straightens out those wires, and we can then feel and love and cry and laugh and enjoy like he made us to. And I watched this happen in her, and it's just been such a beautiful thing. It was amazing to see, and it's still great. I see her on Facebook and her family and her kids, and it thrills me every time, because I think, oh, I'm so happy and so happy.
So that's so awesome.
Yeah, so it's beautiful.
So I just want you to tell people how they can get in touch with you, how they can maybe get involved or pray for your ministry. What's the best way for them to reach out?
Obviously praying for the ministry is wonderful. It's something that's more and more available a lot of places. It's not just through where I do this, but I volunteer at the SEV Pregnancy Center, and I run their post-abortion ministry over there. And there's some other women that do that with me, and there's women that do it. There's a woman that does it at Shepherd of the Hills. It's not really the same thing, but it's the same thing. We started that together, so it's an arm of that. I mean, there's several of those things available. Church on the Way has something. So I would just say, there's another great resource that's all online that I just connected with the woman who does it. Her name is Sidna Massey, and it's called herchoicetoheal.com. And if you go there, it's basically what I do, but it's all on your own, which there's a huge bonus to the group environment for this.
I agree.
That's how it's designed. But to be honest, in our day and age, especially with the COVID business and people can't, we are doing groups, but people aren't always willing to come. So
right.
It's something available. If you want to first take a look at it and start walking through the process, it's online, and you can do it one module at a time, and you can walk through that. At least it opens the door. It starts you thinking. There's an assessment you can do. Do I even need help? That's where I would start. But that's a resource. Or you can contact the SCV Pregnancy Center. If you just typed it in, looked it up, there's a phone number. And if you call and you say you're interested in post-abortion recovery, they will give your phone number directly to me, and I will contact you. You can also email me, if nothing else, if you just want to talk or ask some questions. It doesn't mean you're signing up for something. It just means that you want to talk about this. You want to ask some questions. And I'm happy to hear and happy to pray with you. I'm happy to listen.